I selected person is William Edward Burgant DuBois, is also known as WEBD Du Bois. He's a vital figure in areas such as civil rights and ideas for ordinary people. He was born on February 23, 1868, at Great Barrington, Massachusetts, where he was defined as a mulatto, which is a mixed man of black and white ancestry. He was a civil rights activist, educator, and journalist. He was the co-founder of the NAACP, the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People. He attended different schools with white students and was supported by his white teachers. In 1885, he visited Fisk University in Nashville, Tennessee. He was the first African American to receive a PhD from Howard University in 1895. He served as the editor for The Crisis, which is an NAACP magazine. After becoming an instructor for the University of Pennsylvania, he researched psychology studies of urbanized areas. He organized many Pan-African events, which is basically African American events with dealing with black people around the world during the years of 1919 to 1927. Pan-African means a person related to African birth or descent. In 1940, he founded a magazine by the name of Phylon. He produced significant books to develop his theory based on public health and civil rights about Pan-Africanism. He challenged ideas based on the Booker T. Washington ideologies of blacks within the community. He is in charge of the Peace Information Center, which is an anti-war organization based on peace incentives. Before he died, he went to Ghana to work on the Encyclopedia Africana. Du Bois taught at the Wilbur University and Atlanta University, also known as Clark Atlanta University. Du Bois is a founder of urban psychology, being one of the most critical activists and thinkers. He considered racial inequalities in health and conducted research based on the ideas of books such as The Philadelphia Negro, 1899, and The Health and Physique of the Negro American, 1906. It was important that the society of the people, usually people of color, it helps him establish ideas based on public health. The Philadelphia Negro was a study which considered it provital. It considered ideas based on racial disparities within the urban community. Du Bois used census data with Philadelphia during the time he conducted his research during the Spanish-American War, and the temperance movement was steadily rising. The United States Congress used voting machines for the first time also. President McKinley also signed a bill to create the national parks in the United States. And then, many people did not look at the region of urbanized black communities and how terrible they were. Du Bois addresses many ideas such as social and education that is not much looked on during this time. During this time, Jim Crow laws are still going on. He also developed new areas of studies such as methodology for psychological studies within the community, such as housing conditions and voting rights and social issues of alcoholism and crime. Scholars have valued his research because he studied ideas of economic resources and it helped them recognize the limited amounts of them and marginalism. The racial groups have shown many different types of poor health outcomes with the urbanized areas that do not quite affect the urbanized areas. The researchers also compared the conditions of the poor black communities to the white communities. The next book he made was The Health and the Physique of the Negro American in 1906, and it was published in the 11th Atlanta University Congress. With using information of statistical evidence, it was based on the census in 1900. It developed ideas of racial issues and biases within the insurance, fertility, and moralities within the healthcare services. Within healthcare services, Du Bois discovered that Negro death and sickness rates were increasingly much higher than the white population. It addresses the needs to include better sanitation and economic opportunities so the mortality of black communities would decrease. Du Bois also discovered that health was mainly based on social factors and the idea of social classes. It proved that healthcare will not eventually distribute based on the concept of social classes. The elements of education and employment enable most people, such as black, that cannot receive quality care. Du Bois decided to get involved because he was a mulatto. He was half black, and he wanted people to understand the degree of allowing blacks to attend such a high mortality rate due to healthcare not being evenly distributed. Du Bois proved that discrimination impacts the quality of receiving healthcare. Social sciences have shown such things as diseases that can threaten the population and obtaining health problems. Social determinism of health is the degree to which a person is born, grow, live, work, and their accessibility to healthcare. It is inspired by much more significant things such as economic, social, and political factors that affect a person's ability to healthcare. It is essential during the time that DuBois, as research into race was still a big issue and is increasingly due to the harshness of the society in the late 1800s. In the in the country, the DuBois worked hard and to understand the degree how people were affected due to being in free living areas or being a particular race. Most people would agree with DuBois because of the effectiveness of his research that allowed them to become a researcher. DuBois discovered that race relations have a psychological impact from E. Franklin Fraser, who was influenced by DuBois. DuBois continually assures that health is triggered by social classes. DuBois argues that hope to safeguard all individuals have a fair chance in receiving quality health care regardless of race or social class. It should not be based on the idea that just because of an individual's life in a low-income environment, they are not to receive the quality health care treatment. Many people, such as scholars, have become increasingly aware of the status of public health within the community of black urbanized areas. It is important for people to understand how much of an effect social status and economic status can affect an individual, and still to this day. If a person was to walk to the hospital with injuries, they would most likely be treated last or treated more different by the doctors. Certain doctors lack the compassion for people if they have such problems. In the 1800s, it was just worse. Only a few years before the slaves were freed, it was only a matter of time before individuals got themselves together. Many blacks were mistreated and forced to take care of themselves, as well as adapting to the idea of being free. Again, DuBois made this a topic. He showed the impact of healthcare in the United States to show that it was not evenly distributed among the communities. It showed that people typically overlook the real problems of society and focus on themselves. He wanted to uncover the exact damaging details that are relevant to urbanized areas. By using the census and data from the areas, he dismantled the cold-hard facts or mortality rates of the black population almost 60 years after slavery was abolished. It shows a sense of people being increasingly unaware of how much the black community is affected versus the white population that is limited number of healthcare-related cases. So, basically the beliefs of W.E. Du Bois was that he believed that all people of color share common interests and they should work together for their freedom. So meaning that he discovered that all black people or people of color had the idea to receive health care, but he discovered that many people could not receive quality health care due to being black. So also, it shows that he challenged the scientific racism. This idea about scientific racism is that many people of color do not have the certain knowledge to acquire certain things. So basically, in this article, it states that race was a theory and that many social organisms are eliminated or they're classified within groups, and by them being classified in certain groups, they cannot receive certain qualities or they're not aware of certain qualities, and that causes them to lack social knowledge or scientific knowledge. So basically, I'm going to quote this. It says, whites lynched a black man because he decided upon raping white women. The black man raped white women in response to the unheard but imperious voice of nature, commanding him at the risk of the lynch law to raise his race to a little higher learning. It says whites reacted violently because of an equally intensive determination to protect their race from inferior strains. Basically, it's saying that due to the laws at this time, many people are lacking scientific knowledge like DNA to confirm something or disconfirm it. So basically it's saying just because of a person's race and the lack of scientific knowledge, people become more and more impacted of scientific racism. Also, W.E. Du Bois also has regularities. So the article states that It has details of social phenomenon, including the degree of poverty, the prevalence of suicide, and the extent and the kinds of crime tend to certain rhythms and irregularities we call a social group. So basically, it shows that modern society tells us that people act a certain way because of this. Well, DuBois tried to uncover the ideas based on the facts of black people within the black community to understand how these factors contribute to society as a whole instead of just focusing on two different races. He also came with this idea of a racist orthodoxy, meaning that it's like orthodox. So basically, he states that like many people, I'm saying this so I can say this, many people of color are economically and socially affected during this time because again slavery just was slavery was just cut off, and also it's many ideas about media coming around, propaganda talking about the wars and all that kind of stuff. So it's this rise between anti-slavery and the American political economic. So basically, it made many of the people accept the fact that many people may not be able to get health care due to being black because of what's going on at the time, or they didn't have an acceptance of free slaves, or that it made people don't like slaves or attempt to take care of slaves. So again, people had to take care of themselves, and also caused a high mortality rate for individuals of color because they would not be able to get certain care. And he also talked about blacks having literacy skills such as reading and writing, and he described them as carefully to watch the situation while the vast majority, those left untouched on and inaccessible plantations, biding their time. So basically he's saying, as like the slaves gathered the information, they worked on the fields, they also attempt to gain more information during the time. And he also described that he also came up with ideas of determinism. So basically it shows that he broke down about connections with social determinism, meaning he looked into the communities, not just from the census. He looked to see who had literacy skills. He looked to see who were still economically and socially depressed within his time, and he collected the things, and he described that many people during this time did not, because they didn't have certain skills, they were not able to file for health care, or they would not be able to receive it because of the laws and irregularities during this time period. And it said many people, it's quote, it says knowledge of social laws and irregularities can contribute to social reform by enabling social reform and causally to explain social problems and rationally to chart plans to solve these problems. Meaning that many people affect the way the laws are controlled. So if they said you can't have healthcare because of your race, many people will not be able to receive it because of many people's knowledge of that chance, or the knowledge aspect of social reform. It also affects many people because they're not able to change the laws, and the many laws that did come around, many people were able to change them. His contribution was very effective. He made many researchers and scholars see that black communities were affected, and also not just the black communities but also the doctors. Like say if nowadays if a person goes to the doctor and they don't have health care, they would tend to be the last one to be cared for. But now, the more people you have on insurance, the more money you make. So basically, his contribution at the time, it helped many people realize that blacks were treated unfairly due to the fact that they didn't have many literacy skills, or they were not knowledgeable at the time. So his contribution made many people aware that a change needs to come and that it affects many people. Did protocols and policies, well, not much that changed at the time, because people were still did not like the idea about him researching about urban areas, but it did have some effect on it. It did make people realize that the urban community is still affected at this time, and many people don't make changes to accept it. Did it add or eliminate laws? It did not add laws, but it made some laws more, I should say, it made more laws knowledgeable. It gave more philosophy based on the laws. It made more people aware of healthcare laws. So it basically made more people aware of what the laws were, instead of making everyone follow the law or making everyone agree to the law. Also, it didn't change, but it did bring some sort of change. Did behavioral change result? Behavioral change didn't result from this, but it did make a more vocal approach. Many people still vocalize their thoughts based on his findings and his contributions. Basically, many people still think that urban areas are still affected today, and that many people try to help it, but many people don't, due to they would feel that behavior changes would still be occurring, or they would think that many black communities will be affected, and they still are. So his final outcome, basically, I would say that he made people more aware of the community around them. He made them realize how urban areas are affected. He made them realize about the mortality rates of the black community. He made them realize still after slavery, people still are not fully taken care of, and it developed an idea about many blacks are mistreated, and it still affects people to this day. Not just blacks, but also any race. It makes people know that they still are not treated due to not having health care, and affects many people. And so did he succeed? He did succeed his task. He did put out there about the importance of the black community being affected. He did make that impact to show many people were affected, and it did make people more aware, and also again it makes people want to help more, and also it affects many people. So it puts an effect on not just me as a black person, but put more effect on the doctor or the teacher or the actual citizens, and it make them feel that they have to do something. I'm sorry. I'm sorry about all the background noise. I apologize. But yeah, my person made a huge impact. W.E. Du Bois made a huge impact on life of the urbanized areas, and it made people more aware of his studies and help more people.